Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Thursday Garden Chat, the weekly public service broadcast from Garden Masterclass. We are well into our webinar season now, and our next one coming up is going to be with Marcus de la Fleur, who is a Chicago-based landscape architect who is an expert on rain gardens and sustainable urban drainage systems. He did something for us a couple of years ago. He's terrific on the detail of how you work out what is for many situations a really important way of how we think about gardens and their relationship with the surrounding environment in terms of the water they receive and what happens to that water once it lands on the garden. And for anyone that's involved practically in garden building, that would be a very useful webinar. Now we've got all the webinars until certainly January up on the diary pages of the website, so do please check that out. Now, this evening, I'm with Richard Court, who's down in Somerset in southwest England. We always like to have a two of us here, crowd control if necessary. Annie is away for 3 weeks. She's flew to New Zealand on Monday, and I've been having lots of pictures from her. She's been going around a crazy mosaic garden on South Island today, and no doubt we'll be hearing more from her and her adventures. I think probably most of you are regulars. If you're not, Garden Masterclass, we've been running since 2016, putting on live educational events for garden people in the British Isles. With 2020, we went online and global. We do webinars. We have a huge library of recorded webinars. We've got an even bigger library of recordings of these talks, which are available only to members. Membership entitles you to access to this archive and discounts. And we also have recently started a podcast channel so that it's G Masterclass Substack. And we're trying to get a podcast out once a week, some of which are completely recorded freshly, and others are the audio content of these events for those people who are too busy watering, weeding, potting up, driving to watch stuff, but have time to listen to stuff. And we are producing some premium content, which will again be for Garden Masterclass members only. If you want to find out about membership or just how to keep in touch with us through the monthly email newsletter, then please look on the website. Now, every now and again with Garden Masterclass, well, we travel a lot, but the Netherlands is an obvious country to go to, a terrific place for garden innovation. And tonight we've got Arjan Schepers, who is a nurseryman, and we're going to be talking to him about his nursery, his plants, gardening in the Netherlands, the current garden scene. But we're going to focus on growing media, whatever we choose to put in pots to grow plants in nurseries or containerized plants, which I'm ashamed to say, I think this is about the first time we've ever really looked at this topic on Garden Masterclass, and it's about high time we did.
Wow, shock horror.
It's a crucial one. But the more we think about it, the more there's all sorts of things we haven't talked about. But no, a discussion of growing media will be very useful. Arjan, you didn't start out as a gardener. You had a career in engineering, is that right?
An education, at least.
Education, okay, right.
Yeah, I graduated in industrial automation, it's called. But somewhere halfway during my study, I realized I didn't like it. I couldn't think of an alternative then. So I first graduated, finished my study, and then started thinking again about what to do. And suddenly I realized that I wanted to play outside. And after a few other trials, a few jobs, I decided I wanted a nursery. Because my parents had a very small nursery, mostly boxes, and every time I felt bad or angry about things failing in my life, I the boxes were my safe haven, sort of. So I started growing boxes, and then went to school, back to school to learn about growing plants, and started working in one of the biggest nurseries in the Netherlands, which grew conifers and boxes and things like that. And that was, well, the start of it. Did that for 2 years. Very, very boring. And I wanted something else.
So what were you doing? I mean, I imagine
well,
mindless potting up or what?
Yeah, things like that, and digging out conifers, tuyas, and there was, for example, an order. Somebody ordered 100,000 conifers, and since I had the most education, I had to count them. Yeah, but it also means you can't talk with your colleagues. So
you do counting.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. 1, 2, 3 until 100, and then again.
Yes.
So yeah, boring, boring, boring. So I wanted another job, and in the phone book I found another nursery from a chap called Koen Jansen.
Ah.
Yeah. Never heard of the guy. Didn't know the difference between a geranium and an helenium. But I remember walking into his nursery and realizing, yes, this is what I want. So, well, it's what I got in the end. I have a small perennial nursery now, growing a wide variety of different perennials. After, yeah, I think it took me 10 years to start, and it's I think we are in the 21st year this year.
Right.
So slow start, had a full-time job on the side, and slowly building a base in customers and in plants and in knowledge, I suppose. And there's at some point there's a tipping point where you start to earn money, and people start to recognize your company and the quality, and you suddenly get very busy. At least that's how how my nursery developed. So,
what was that tipping point for you, Arjan? How long did that take, do you think?
Well, I got a slow start because we started out in a field we rented from my family, and after 5 years, I decided I wanted to take matters a bit more seriously. I wanted to build a greenhouse, and that wasn't possible in that field, so we had to relocate and start all over again. We moved some 30 kilometers into the countryside. So we had to more or less start all over again. So it took me maybe 10 years to really yeah, consider it a serious nursery. Sorry?
Yeah, how were you selling plants at this point?
At first, I just put up a sign on the roadside and some advertising in garden clubs, magazines, and things like that. Mouth to mouth advertising is always the best. But yeah, and plant fairs, markets. There are quite a few of them in the Netherlands, at least in those days.
Yeah.
And I always considered it as free advertising, but also as a way to sell plants. But it's difficult. We are not far away from Kuhn Janssen. We're sort of in between Kuhn Janssen and Hessenhoff, two of the famous Dutch.
Okay, yeah.
And when customers want a special plant, those are the first nurseries they think of. It's not
right. Yeah.
So I
It
really
helps being between the two.
no. Yeah, well, maybe, but I really had to find my own group of customers, and I think that I managed to do that. I very early in my career, I realized that peat is a strange thing for growing plants in, and I wanted to basically get rid of it. So I will tell you a little bit about the background of peat and how it's harvested and why it's used, and then explain how I tested some alternative ingredients and mixtures of those ingredients. I'll show the results, and we have future plans with it. We're not done yet. First, in the Netherlands, in 2022, we produced 8.2 million cubic meters of growing media. That's metric, of course. I'm not familiar with the English system of
it's completely mad and old-fashioned, so don't worry.
You have to understand this. It's a lot. I don't know what 8.2 million cubic meters is, but it's a lot. And 50% is for professional use, and the other half is put into bags and sold in garden centers across the country. Of those 8.2 million cubic meters, 62% is peat. These numbers are I got from the Dutch National Association of Growing Media Companies, and this is 2022 again. So 62% peat, 17% coir. Is that an English word, coir?
It is, yes.
Yeah, coconut fibers. 5% is mineral wool. That's mostly used in greenhouses to grow vegetables like tomatoes and cucumbers, and for cut flowers. So not really interesting for perennials or other pot plants. And only 16% is other organic ingredients like compost or wood fibers or whatever. And within those 16% also is all the stony materials like pumice or perlite, things like that. And this, for me, I always thought this is a weird thing. 2/3 of the stuff that's in my potting soil is from very far away, at least, from the other side of the world, mostly. Just on short, peat is, for those who don't know, dead plants that sink underwater and then don't rot because there's no oxygen. And most of the peat that we use in horticulture comes from wetlands in the Baltic states. In Western Europe, it's not allowed to harvest it anymore. The way they harvest it is they drain the water where the peat is under, so to speak, and then they dig up the peat, and then they let the water back in, and as the companies call it, then the peat can grow back again. And this is how that looks like. The top of the picture is the wild wetlands where humans don't have anything to do. You can't do agriculture. You can't live there. It's too wet. And when humans don't interfere with it, then it's nature. And the lowest part of the picture is the way it's harvested. They dig canals so that the water runs off, and then they dig away the peat up to 10 meters deep. And it grows back a millimeter per year. So the peat industry, they call this a renewable source. And they are right, it grows back 1 millimeter a year. But when you dig out 10 meters, then it's like 10,000 years before it has regrown. And I think we are destroying nature to grow plants, basically. I simply didn't want to do that. I didn't want to be responsible for destroying nature to grow my plants. And there's some other objections, is maybe a word, to peat and coir. It comes from the other side of the world, especially coir is produced in India, Sri Lanka. It has a lot of the way it's produced is not very friendly for the people who are doing that, who are producing. They take the fibers from the husk manually, for example, and not something I wanted to be responsible for. So I wanted another potting soil, we call it. So every year in winter, I had a talk with the sales manager of my supplier, because every nursery has its own mixture based on the plants that you grow, the type of pot that you use, the way you water your plants, the quality of your water. I think many people don't realize it, but every nursery has its own recipe. And the big soil producing companies, they make the soil, the growing medium to your liking. And I always had this talk every winter that I wanted less peat in my mixture. And they always said, yeah, it's not possible because all different reasons, but it's not possible to grow without peat. And I didn't believe it. So I always said, well, take 10% off, put something else in, and we'll see how it goes. And every year my plants were fine without the peat. So the last mixture I had with peat is 50% peat, 20% wood fiber, 12% of the coconut stuff, 10% humus, and 8% compost. And this is more or less the same numbers as the total yearly production of growing medium in the Netherlands. And I couldn't change it, not with my supplier. And there are quite a few very good reasons to use peat. It absorbs a lot of water, I think 10 times its own weight in water. And very important, we'll talk about that later maybe, it controls the release of nutrients. It can hold the nutrients and make them available for the plant roots. And there's no other product that can do it in the way peat does that. It is clean, of course. There's no weeds in it. There's no diseases or fungi or whatever. It's very lightweight, and it's available in large quantities. Far away, but available in large quantities. So it's perfect for growing plants, except that you have to harvest it in nature areas. It is so perfect that there's no one-to-one alternative. So we have to find combinations of alternative ingredients to find something that at least is more or less the same in behavior as peat. And I very quickly realized that the thing I mentioned just before, the ability of peat to bind or to make nutrients available is very important and couldn't be found anywhere else with any other ingredient. So we had to use a slow release fertilizer. And it's a chemical fertilizer, it's not organic. And you've probably seen it, it's the yellow balls that are in some potting soils. And they contain fertilizer, and the yellow stuff is it slowly releases the fertilizer that's in the balls, and therefore giving sort of micro doses of fertilizer every now and then, instead of organic fertilizers that when they get wet, they fall apart and they are available for the plants. And when there's too much water, then they wash away. And you can lose up to 30% of your fertilizer. And I didn't want to fertilize my plants every 2 or 3 months. So we had to use this chemical fertilizer. My supplier didn't want to help. None of the companies that I asked for a peat-free soil and coir-free soil had any experience with it. So they didn't want to sell it to me. So I bought, I think, some 15 ingredients separately. Because I wanted to use the ingredients, the products from this potting soil company, but not their peat and not their coir. I wanted the quality they make, the quality they guarantee, and I wanted for them to maybe a bit ambitious, but I wanted them to change to get the experience with peat-free soils. So in 3 years, we tested maybe 25 different mixtures with all sorts of organic, quickly renewable and locally produced ingredients in all sorts of, what's the word? Well, we tested different mixtures, some with 100% of compost, sometimes 25% compost, and we went from a very extreme mixtures to a more and more refined mixture in a certain direction. And this is what it looked like. I think this is some 7 mixtures, I think, from left to right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and there's a 7th one in the right of your screen. And we tested these 7 mixtures with, in this case, 2 plants, but there's more on the other side of the field, always with dry tolerating plants and with wet water loving plants, how do you call it? And with acidic plants and more lime lovers, to get an impression of how this soil mixture would behave in our wide range of plants. We grow maybe 1,500 different plants, different varieties. So, and I want one mixture for all of these plants. And you can see here already there are big differences in growth. And in this one, you can't see it really clearly. This has just been potted, but here you can see the different mixtures. This, I think, is 100% compost. This is with some pumice in it, with the white stuff in. So we tested a lot of different stuff, but always on 5, 6, 7 different plants. And this is after 4 or 5 weeks. And you can see big differences in growth, in quality of plants. You can also see that the plant in the foreground is doing a lot better than the plant in the background. I think in the background is Gilania trifoliata, slowly growing. And that's also one of the things we tested, how the soil mixtures, our favorite mixtures, reacted in the long term, how plants reacted on them in the long term. Big differences. This is a mixture with a lot of compost in it. There's always 3 plants of the same mixture. So the middle plant is doing not bad, but the other 2 are very poor. This is a mixture with a lot of compost. And here you can see, maybe here, the yellow fertilizer stuff. This is a mixture with less compost and more coarse materials, more drainage, and that resulted in better plants. So during the testing, we quickly realized we had 2 major problems. One is the structure of the soil in the long term. After 6, 7, 8 months, the compost and all the other organic ingredients, they start to decompose, and the particles get smaller and smaller, and in the end you end up with a soil that's like a wet mud, and there's no plants growing in there. The roots start to rot and plants simply die. And the other one is the binding of the nutrients of the fertilizer. And for both, we had to find a solution. And for the long-term structure, we started with a lot of fine materials in the soil, and during our tests, the mixtures with the bigger particles in it performed a lot better. So we gradually increased the size of the particles we used, and we choose more and more slowly decomposing ingredients like pine bark, for example. But not the stony parts, because like perlite and pumice, I'm not sure if you guys know what it is, but it's like popcorn made of stone, and you need a lot of energy to make the stones explode so that they get the structure you want in potting soil. And I didn't want to use that amount of energy for my soil. The other problem, the lesser binding of nutrients, we added powdered clay for binding the nutrients. It's one of the few ingredients that were available to us that more or less binds nutrients. Not as much as peat, but still. And we used the slow release fertilizer because all other fertilizer, organic fertilizer, are washing away when we water the plants. And like I said, I didn't want to fertilize my plants every 3 months because then I had to keep a schedule. This plant is potted in January and this plant is potted in June, and so too complicated for my small business. So we are still using the chemical fertilizer, unfortunately. But my supplier said it was impossible. The industry said it was impossible. But we have a potting soil, a growing media that's peat-free and coir-free. And I think we can grow good plants in that soil. And this is what it looks like. It looks a lot like forest soil, I think. There's a lot of organic matter, but there's a lot of big particles. And it's a pity that you can't touch it because people always want to put their hands in it. And it really feels really soft and like gentle. There's no sharp particles in it. This is the recipe. It's no secret. So everybody who wants to copy it, go ahead. 1/3 is compost, but 10% of that is 10% is of the total volume is composted wood cuttings. That's also a very slowly decomposing part. 30% is pine bark, some wood fibers, and 10% clay. And I think even consumers at home can imitate this as long as you use slowly composing parts, ingredients like bark, for example. So this is what we use for 3 years now, I think, 4 years. Never had any complaints from customers. My plants look healthy during the season. They keep growing well into autumn. So very happy with it. And for the future, we really, really would like an organic slow release fertilizer. If anybody knows anything like that, please let me know. We would really like an organic fertilizer that's works for like 12 months or so. One problem is the availability of ingredients. Peat is widely available in huge quantities. All other ingredients are a limited supply. If all nurseries in the Netherlands stop using peat tomorrow, we have a big problem. There's not enough potting soil available then. So we need more ingredients and more knowledge about the ingredients. The industry thinks that in 25 years, in 2050, there will be a 400% increase of demand for potting soil.
Wow.
Yeah, shocking. worldwide, that is. And uh, a lot of that will still be peat because there's no alternatives available that we know of. So we need to get more experience, more knowledge, and yeah, I think I did my part so far. And I think this was the last slide. Yeah.
Great.
So
Thanks, Arjan.
yeah, we now have a working peat-free soil, more or less. And there are other nurseries in the Netherlands using it at the moment for another. I think the first one started 2 years ago. So there's more people getting experience with it and adjusting it to their own needs and their own plants. And so yeah, there is. It is possible.
Mm.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to back to people's faces. Yes, I remember I used to have a small nursery business a long time ago, and yeah, I remember back around about 1990, I was experimenting with peat alternatives. And the main problem I had was nitrogen robbery. That some of the ingredients would be selectively their breakdown. The bacteria would be pulling so much nitrogen out of the soil, actually getting nitrogen to the plants you wanted to grow was the problem. And was this something you found?
Not so much, surprisingly, but I think that's because we used a lot of the tree bark and the wood fibers that decompose very slowly, and also the slow release fertilizer, which gives a small doses of nitrogen every now and continuously. So there's always something available for the plants. We did have a problem with acidity, with pH, because we started with a large quantity of compost, and that's very, I'm not sure what the word is, but non-acidic.
Alkaline?
Yeah.
pH 8, 9?
Yeah, yeah. So, and there's no, when pH is like 4, like in a peat, you can add some lime powder, and then you have a calcium source for your plants, and the pH is where you want it. And there's no such thing for alkaline soils. So we had to adapt to that. And that was a problem. And I'm not sure how, but that also influenced the nitrogen intake of plants. But at one point, I decided not to study too much chemistry, just watch the plants. And when they were performing well, I thought, well, I must be doing something right.
I mean, one problem is actually a linguistic one. In British English, the word compost means two completely different things. One, of course, compost is what you make in your compost heap. It's decayed material, but we also use compost to describe growing media, growing substrate, and it contributes to the problem that people think, oh, I can make my own potting compost with what comes out of the compost heap. Now, of course, plant stuff in 100% compost, after a while it all decays and just end up with a kind of soggy mass.
Yeah.
One of the great things about peat is, although it's organic matter, it breaks down so slowly. This happens over such a scale. It's not a problem. So, I mean, you've got presumably enough mineral matter or enough very coarse material to actually stop this collapse.
Yeah, or at least slow it down for the time that the plant is in the pot.
I mean, certainly I know De Hessenhoff, they make their own compost with leaf mold. And I've heard various complaints about that, and that it does, and after you buy plants and you just end up with this kind of, and then you can end up with this kind of soggy mass.
Yeah, and Hans, the owner of Hessenhof, is
Yes.
producing his own compost or his own potting soil. And I didn't want to do that. I just wanted to call somebody, please bring me a truckload of potting soil or growing media. And um, I didn't want to rely on one ingredient because when we all started using leaf mold to plant pots, there's no leaves left outside. We have to use everything to grow our plants in.
Yeah.
So I wanted a variety of ingredients so that we could, if one ingredient suddenly is not available anymore, which happens every now and then, then we can switch to something else without destroying the growing medium we had.
Arjan, where is the clay coming from that you're using? What kind of clay is that?
I'm not sure what it is. It has a commercial name. I suppose it's something like a bentonite or something like that. It's powder. That's very important. Yeah. So it has a large surface area.
And how long have you been using the recipe that you've found now? The one that you sort of is your
for 3
sweet
years.
spot at the moment.
3 years now.
Right.
Yeah, this was our 3rd season. Yeah.
Right. And the compost is on site? Sorry. No, the compost is coming from on site. Is that the compost you're making?
No,
right.
no. I started, one of the first trials we did was with compost from our local green recycler. And the results were very good. But he couldn't guarantee quality all year round, and he couldn't guarantee supply all year round. They start collecting the leaves now as we speak. But next year in August, there's no leaf mold available. So we use a compost from our the potting soil supplier because he can guarantee that we use 2 compost types from this supplier because he can guarantee the quality and the supply all year round. And it's very important that the quality is constant and it's clean and there's no weeds, seeds left and things like that. And I want the same compost in August as I got in January or whatever. And that's a problem with some other suppliers.
Question from Wendy. Do you use any manures in your planting or could you? No. And also another question, could you use loaded biochar as a slow release organic fertilizer?
We are very interested in that. No experience with it so far, but we are looking at different types of organic fertilizer that are, in some way slow release. There are other options, but no experience, not yet.
No, and of course biochar needs quite a bit of energy to make, which counts against it.
Yeah, but the same with the chemical fertilizer.
Yes. Depends what energy source you're using to do that. So moving on beyond the compost, what are your sort of current trends you're noticing in Dutch gardening, and what are the plants that the perennials you find are just walking out of the nursery at the moment?
Well, the biggest trend, the biggest increase in sale in my nursery is a new type of customer, not so much a new type of plant, but
yes, always welcome.
Yeah, because my customers traditionally are the traditional gardening ladies who are 60 plus at least. And there is a younger generation coming into the nursery who don't know anything about gardening and don't have time for gardening, but they do have money. So they ask me to design their garden, design the planting, supply all the plants, and even do the maintenance of the plantings. And that's very interesting. Because it makes the nursery more efficiently. Because I can, of course, when I do a design, I can think, oh, this type of phlox is maybe, I have too many in stock. I can put it in my design if I really want to. But also, I can sell more plants. These gardening ladies, they buy 1 or 3 of this phlox that they were looking for years. And these younger people, they only care about, they want to help the bees, increase biodiversity, and
oh, cool.
and I'll help them, of course. So
never mind all the other insects. So long as the
bees. Yeah, I always ask them, "What's your favorite bee?" Then
what about the flies?
Yeah, and they can't name any bee, so they just think of honey bees. But
which are part of the problem, to be honest.
It's like.
And do you think they're gardens that they want to be in as well? As it's not just about helping biodiversity? Do they talk to you about what they want out of it?
That's always one of my first questions. What do you like about a garden? How would you like to use it? Because if you don't like your own garden, you're not connected to it. You're not ready. You don't want to spend any time or energy in it. So my first job is always make sure that the customer likes its garden. And I put many plants in, and I'm confident that bees and other insects like those type of gardens as well. But first, my first concern is always the customer.
Yeah, I mean, the last year I spent any time in the Netherlands, I mean, it was a very extensive trip. I was researching a book, and so I drove through every single province. And I came to the conclusion that the Dutch national flower was Hydrangea Annabelle. And
sorry about that.
What else can one say? That it seems to be it's the next best thing to a kind of plastic flower, I decided.
But it's not plastic.
Only just,
not a great use to biodiversity. No. I mean, in terms of thinking more widely, I mean, there was a time when we could say of Piet Oudolf that he designed everywhere, but never in the Netherlands. And I think his career has taken off in the Netherlands. But how much influence has he had in the country? And you're entitled to say not very much if you want to.
Peat-free is a term that comes to mind. He designed a few public parks, and I think those are the only plantings he did that are visible to the people.
Yes.
And again, there's the same division in the types of customers. The old gardening ladies, they know Piet Oudolf, and they know his work, and they want his type of garden, please.
Yes.
But they have usually a very small garden.
Oh, right.
So it's virtually impossible to get the same atmosphere in such a small garden. So I have to explain a lot about that. And the younger generation, they had never heard of Piet Oudolf.
Oh, that's interesting. It's very interesting. I would have thought they would have done.
We are a strange people. We are garden lovers, plant lovers. We are a bubble. And in this bubble, people know, of course, Piet Oudolf, but outside of it, nobody's heard of him.
No, I mean, of course, one gets a very false impression reading Gardens Illustrated, which seems to be have all these gardens that are kind of basically Piet Oudolf inspired. I mean, I get a bit fed up with them after a while. I wish people would think of something else to do. But no, I mean, yeah, a lot of them, yes, yeah, really lovely gardens, but that obviously gives us a completely distorted impression. And a couple of people said to me actually that the person over the last kind of 30 years who has perhaps been most influential was Tonte Linden, who I did meet a couple of times. I mean, crazy character, really inspired character. We had these conversations in sort of speaking terrible German to each other. And had this wonderful garden up in Friesland. And he seemed to sort of actually get through to an awful lot of people, just in sort of about let's be much.
Yeah, but still the same bubble.
Yeah, still the same bubble. Yeah. Yes, and outside the bubble, it's Head Ranger Annabelle.
Yeah, garden centers, and the biggest problem, in my opinion, is that in the Netherlands there's no decent gardening on TV.
Oh, so, really? Yeah. Not that Britain has either. Richard, comments? Gardeners World.
Oh, I don't watch it. I'm afraid
your week does not go from one Gardeners World to another.
It doesn't. No. If there's something that somebody mentions, that I will tune in. But yeah, that's me at the moment.
Maybe argue that Monty Don is more influential than Piet Oudolf in the Netherlands.
Oh, really? That's interesting. Interesting. Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't watch it, so
no.
But there's not much of a. We are very good at growing plants in the Netherlands. But we're not very good at using them.
I think, to be honest, I mean, my view of Dutch gardening is framed very much from what I can see as I drive along. Obviously, a lot of Dutch gardens happen out in the front, which means I've spent
tidy.
Over the last 30 years, I spent quite a lot of time driving around Dutch suburbs, and I must say they're one hell of a lot better now than they used to be. Even never minding how in the past used to have these gardens that were kind of completely kind of random. People would go into the garden centre. There's a conifer here. There's a bunch of bulbs there. There's a perennial there. It just seemed to be totally random. And that garden's largely disappeared. You've now got much more kind of, I think, much more thought through gardening happening. And in fact, we've got a question here about what type of garden do young people prefer, traditional or more naturalistic styles. You see quite a lot of kind of basically kind of historical inspired gardens with clipping, and it's not my thing, but great, someone's doing something good with the garden. So
the people that come to my nursery prefer the naturalistic.
Yes.
Do you think they know that they're choosing that, or is it just that that's where the sort of focus goes without them knowing the difference, or do they have a knowledge?
Well, I've been very lucky that a few years ago I was asked by the local council to do a planting in the city center, and I did together with a friend. We did a naturalistic planting, and people now come to the nursery. I've heard you made that. I want the same, please. So it's maybe. I'm a bit biased, but I think there's more people wanting the naturalistic planting than the traditional English border, we call it here.
Oh, that's interesting. And Wendy is flagging up that people in the States are now into Gardener's World as well. And she thinks they just like the dogs. Such a long time I've watched since I watched. Is it Monty Don's dogs charging all over the place, Richard?
I have no idea.
I'm not
surprised by I'm not surprised by the dogs. They seem to be a big feature in the UK generally. I don't have one, so I can't.
Personally, I garden with cats.
Yeah.
and who like rolling around in grasses, particularly Stipa tenuissima is there largely for the benefit of the cats, I think.
Cesleria
Okay.
autumnalis. It's the favorite here.
Well, they completely ignore that, I'm going to say.
Okay.
They're welcome to the Stipa. Oh, God. Oh, God. He's designing a dog garden. Oh, dear, Chelsea next year. Oh, for God's sake. Oh, dear. Climb to the ridiculous.
Hopefully no AstroTurf.
No
I asked somebody I was gardening for, I wanted AstroTurf so they could wash it down for their dog after it had undone its business, which was horrendous. I managed to convince them not to do that, which is very unfortunate.
Right, I think we're in danger of ending up on a real low note. Arjan, tell us about some of the perennials you're growing at the moment that you think are wonderful and you think we should hear about, so we can end on a kind of really inspiring note.
I should have prepared a few pictures, maybe. Yeah. I'm really fond of Amsonias.
Yeah.
And maybe I can use your knowledge or your network to solve my biggest mystery. I have an Amsonia in the nursery, which is like a mini Hubrichtii,
yes.
60 centimeters high. And I have it under the name Amsonia hexan with an X. And nobody has ever heard of it. Not even Google knows it. And I can't remember how I got it.
Somebody's probably misspelt something.
Yeah.
I know a few years ago, Richard Hawke in the Chicago Botanic Gardens did a trial. Are you aware of that?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not there. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've been. It has been suggested that I should take a magnifying glass and check the hairs on the side of the leaf. And
yes.
I've always learned if you can't see the difference by eye, then it's not there.
Don't say that to a botanist.
No, but I'm not a botanist. No, but the plant is a mystery, and it's really good. It's beautiful, and it's in a very useful size.
Yes.
So I would really like to learn more about it.
Probably the best thing is stick your name on it, get plant breeders' rights on it.
Yeah. Well, no. It's another no.
Another story.
Yeah.
Okay, Amazonias, they're great plants, aren't they?
Yeah. There's I mean, when they pop out of the ground, they're like asparagus in green and blue, and they have this nice flower and the seed pods and the autumn color, of course. So slow growing sometimes, but slow propagating.
Yeah.
So but one of my favorites.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you very much. That was all very interesting, and glad we've covered had a discussion about potting media at last.
Yeah.
Say compost, potting media.
Thank you, Arjan. It'd be good to hear of how your story carries on, to be honest, and how it develops.
Yeah, and maybe interesting. Just last Tuesday, I was given a few first demo versions of a biodegradable pot that we're going to test next year.
That would be a progress.
Yeah, no plastic.
What's that made of? Do you know?
No, but I don't know what it is, but I do know it's certain. It has a German certificate that it's biodegradable and allowed in organic farming and things like that. It's a 3D printed thing. I have it somewhere. I can't show it to you. But yeah, that will be a big improvement. I think that maybe in a few years will be the next chat. Would be great.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So that was That's marvelous. Thank you. Good to have those insights, and look forward to meeting up with you again sometime. And thank you for joining us this evening.
Okay.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.